Good morning. How is everybody doing? We want to welcome our visitors. And we also want to welcome our state nationals. Good morning. Good morning, good morning. Oh man. Woo. There's so much we can talk about. And you know, sometimes we sit here and we try to limit God to one thing when it could be many. You know? One of the things that, God's got us in a spot right now of really standing on truth, no matter how it feels, no matter what it is, just gotta stand on it, right? Right?
Right.
Everybody's like, sure. John, we're gonna go to John 10, we're gonna start there. We're gonna start there. You know, I was listening to this young man had a rant the other day, and I showed Farron his rant, and he just looked at him and shook his head. This guy was just putting down women preachers, just like, that's just no, and just, I mean, there's a place for those that preach the gospel and all that, and I'm like, yes, there is, exactly. I don't know what you're talking about, but, And then in the process of the anger, then he goes, where are the men? I said, so why do you think the women are preaching? Where are the men? And I was just laughing about it. But, God, again, it goes back to, there's neither Jew or Greek, ma'am. There's male and female. There's nothing. He's called all of us, every one of us here, to preach the gospel somewhere. Preach the gospel somewhere, even if it's in your own home. And that's what's happened. So many are not doing that. They think you have to have a pulpit or a stage. You do. God gave you that the day you got born again. You immediately step into that place. So there's some things that some of you are going to recognize that God had me go back and just re-look some scriptures over. Especially with a lot happening. So we're going to go to John. We're going to start with John 10 this morning. And I'll start at verse 1. It says, verily, verily, I say unto you, he that entereth not by the door into the sheepfold, but climbeth up some other way, the same as a thief and a robber. Because thieves and robbers, they got to come in. And they can't do it, through the front door. They try to be sneaky, but they're really not that sneaky. They're pretty loud most of the time. I mean, what does a thief and a robber do? They damage, they tear up, right? They take things that don't belong to them. Okay? So here he's saying that he that entereth not by the door into the sheepfold, but climbeth up some other way, the same as a thief and a robber. But he that entereth in by the door is the shepherd of the sheep. To him the porter, which is a doorkeeper of the fold, who opens to the shepherds to get their flocks in the morning and who receives them at night. I always wondered when I would sit there and I would always see, pictures when I first came to the Lord, and you would see these like rock enclosures where they had the sheep at night. And then you had that one that laid by the door. And it wasn't the shepherd. And so here he says what? It's the porter that openeth and the sheep hear his voice. Now, it says to him, so who's he talking about? It's talking about the shepherd, right? To him the porter openeth, and the sheep hear his voice, and he calleth his own sheep by name, and leadeth them out. And when he putteth forth his own sheep, he goeth before them, and the sheep follow him, for they what? Know his voice. And a stranger will they not follow, but will flee from him, for they know not the voice of strangers. We quote a lot of times that, well, the sheep know his voice, and the voice of the stranger they know not. But you know what? If we go back at the beginning of verse 5, it sits there and it says, and a stranger will they not follow. So we can't leave that part out, right? So, so the sheep follow the shepherd because they know the voice. They won't follow a stranger because they're not supposed to know a stranger's voice, right? And a lot of time when you see that, you think of the enemy. But what if it was you? Now hear me out when I say this. Because if we really stop and we look at when we read scripture, there's an inner voice. When there's thoughts, you have a voice, yes? Okay? Many times, and God was really sharing this with me, and there's so much I want to talk about, but it really stuck with me. Many of you, we've shared with you guys, we've been walking through some things that everyone has to walk through. Aaron's had his walk with the Lord regarding health, and what's my walk? My walk is making sure I do what I'm supposed to do on my part, because he's got to walk that out for himself. Yes? Now, if a stranger tried to come into your home, would you challenge him? Of course. Okay? I believe sickness is a stranger, is it not? Is it supposed to be? Is lack supposed to be a stranger? If someone wants to come in your home and take what doesn't belong to them, is that a stranger? And okay, I'll keep going. This morning I was just a whole lot. He says, this parable spake Jesus unto them, but they understood not what things they were which he spake unto them. Then said Jesus unto them, verily, verily, I say unto you, I am the door of the sheep. And all that ever came before me are thieves and robbers, but the sheep did not hear them. I am the door. By me, if any man entereth in, he shall be saved, and shall go in and out and find the pasture. The thief cometh not, but what? To steal, to kill, and destroy. And I'm come that they might have life, and they might have it more abundantly. So whenever a stranger comes in, or tries to come in, would you allow them in? Would you tell them to get out? Because what does a thief do? Kill, steal, and destroy, but it can only do it if you allow that, right? Can't take something that doesn't belong to him unless you hand it over. Can't kill anything unless you what? Allow it. And you're like, where are you going? Well, when it comes to, and I'll use for us because we've been walking this out, sickness. Yeah, didn't share it all with everybody because there comes a point when you get to a place, I could run around and I could talk all day long about this stranger in my house. And what are you going to look at me and say, well, what are you doing about it? Well, what do you mean a stranger? Well, sickness is a stranger because when Jesus died on the cross, he took all that, right? So that sickness no longer is my friend. Sickness no longer I should know. Now that doesn't mean things don't pop up, right? But if they pop up, what are you supposed to do? Speak to them. But do we? Just go with me. I'm going some places. And the Lord was showing me so many people will sit there and they get healed. And once they're healed, they don't believe they're healed until a doctor tells them they're healed. But I thought you were standing on scripture, you were healed. Right? But I got to go to a stranger to tell me I'm healed by testing or whatever. But if I'm sitting here and if I don't follow, because I can't follow a stranger, if what? I know his voice. Because he's the only one I'm going to follow. So I'm going to follow truth is what I'm going to follow. I don't care what my body feels like. I don't care what it looks like. I'm going to follow truth. That doesn't mean my body right away is going to respond because, Daddy talked about this last weekend and mentioned it. The spirit's willing, but the flesh is weak. Well, guess what? When you got born again, your spirit's what? It's new. It's whole. It's everything, right? So what begins to take place? Now you've got the new man, the new spirit, but your soul is like, who are you? So you've got to renew the soul, bring it into alignment with the new you, right?
It goes back to a conversation that was had, oh my goodness, I guess right after we got married, between, I believe it was Danny, David, and Farron, but talking about how you have you've been saved 2, 3, 4 years, so you've got a 2, 3, 4-year-old talking to what? Whatever your age is, in the flesh, and they're trying to tell them down, and here's this like, who are you? Who are you to tell me? You're only 2 years old. Oh, but the power in the 2-year-old, because power and authority had been given to him once he got born again, right? But you're not going to know the power, and you're not going to be able to work the power until you do something about it. Now, he says his sheep know his voice, right? But how many people run around out there living a sinful life, and they're saying, God is my God? Not if you're willfully sinning, he's not. So there's a stranger that you've allowed in that has lied to you. Have you ever heard you've heard ventriloquists? They can sit there and they don't move their lips, but there's the voice coming out of a dummy. That's what the enemy does. But here's what people don't want to hear. They're the dummy. Because they got the wrong voice talking through them. I mean, there's even things with myself that I'm sitting there and I'm constantly growing and I'm constantly moving and I'm constantly getting in my word. And when the word challenges me, guess what's going to pop up? The dummy.
That's right.
Because what is it? The dummy's the flesh. The dummy's the carnal-minded, as they said, meathead. Gonna be going, hey, that ain't right. And it's like, oh. So what do? I talked about this a little bit Tuesday night. I have a process I have to go through. I have to identify the part I'm struggling with so that I can get the answers that I need. But so many people don't want to identify the problem to find out what the answer is so they can move forward. They want to sit in it because that's an opinion they have of it because the dummy's talking. But he said that my sheep know my voice, and says they will not follow a stranger. It said that before it said because they don't know a stranger's voice. That's why we have to hear from God, but you can't hear from God without getting in the Word. Correct?
Amen.
So here I am. Sickness comes to my body. Now I'm just using this as an example. Comes to my body. I have a moment. There is a moment of time. What am I going to do? Am I going to allow it to talk to me, or am I going to talk to it? Because see, I know his voice. Right? So if I know his voice, then I'm going to speak to the stranger, you got to go. But what if it doesn't leave right away? You going to give up? Bible says resist the devil, right? Wait a minute. What's the rest of it, Michael? Humble?
Humble yourself, submit to God, and resist the devil.
And here's the thing. When you do those things, the enemy's going to run. Because you're wearing him out. How many of you sit there and have had some of you animal people, have a strange dog or cat come to your house just constantly, and you're just sitting there, and you have a way of getting rid of them, but you either give in or you stand your ground. I won't feed it anymore. I won't feed him anymore. I won't feed him anymore. But the animal people in here, y'all are like me, we're going to feed them.
That's right.
We're going to feed them. But we're talking about the things that are strange, supposed to be strangers to us. And I tell you what, I went over that and it got confirmed, and that's what I thought was cool, because remember, for the ones that were here Tuesday night, I played the video that was the prophecy from Lester Summerall, right? About all the things taking place. And it got confirmed this morning when I was scanning through, and I heard a message, or part of the end of a message. And on the video that I played the other night, Tuesday night, it talked about the times we're in, dealing with the transgenders, the homosexuality, but then also it went to bestiality, right? And that's already happened. A lady just got arrested, 10 years in prison. So it's funny how you watch the prophecy, because he literally, if you go back and look, prophecy is never wrong. And there's an order to it. And everything that he said, 1 through 7, has happened. Every one of them. And then he also talked about revival. And we're not going into all that. But the thing is, I'm seeing more and more pastors and churches standing up, taking scripture and saying that God is all inclusive of sin. And it doesn't matter how big you sin, it's okay. No, that's not what my Bible says. Right? It's not. Now look, that comes to a point too, where someplace you can stand strong, the Bible says, this ain't doing it. But then all of a sudden you might have it looks like a small sin, but there really is no big sin, small sin. But it can look real little over here. Well, it's okay. Oh, it's all right. That's just a small thing. And I used to lie a lot. When people said, it was just a little white lie. Ain't nothing little about it. It's still what? A sin. And what is a stranger going to do to come into your house? They're probably going to lie, right? Isn't that what the enemy does? Isn't he the father of what? He's the father of lies. So why would one small tiny white lie be okay if he is the father of lies, right? But look what's happened. People, oh, God is love. There's grace and mercy. Yes, but there comes a time that he said, well, my spirit won't always. What? Yeah. Strive with man. I'm like, I don't want to lose that. And that's why having this word is so important. So he tells us here, again, that verse 4, and when he putteth forth his own sheep, he goeth before them, and the sheep follow him, for they know his voice. He says they follow him. They follow the voice. Right? I love watching people that own sheep and how they train their dogs. Commands. It's the voice. They stand there when they train them. After they get them trained, then they give commands. And the dog, boom, boom, boom. And what? Gather the sheep. But the sheep are also trained. Now we're looking at a natural earthly example. Where we have the voice because we know the voice. So if God says turn left, what are we supposed to do? Turn left. He says turn right, turn right. But so many people have allowed the strange voice to come in. And I heard David and Farron were talking the other day when we were out here about how so many times people, because they won't listen to the voice of God, they're seared. Their souls are seared. And, I got to thinking about that. I've heard, we've heard it and everything, but I really sat there and I thought, what happens when that takes place, when you sear a wound? It cauterizes the wound, right? But it kills the nerves. And what's happened over time? People have gotten so, what is the word? Cold, you could say that, but they've just got desensitized. Calloused. But the word is alive. It's real. And living on the inside of us, right? So it's always moving. It's always going. It's always hearing for the instruction. So when a stranger comes in, first off it says that they won't follow him, for they know his voice, and a stranger they won't follow. But if people, and I really got to looking at this, you have those that get born, or they receive their healing. And when they receive their healing, they jump for joy, they're excited. But do you realize when you begin to walk out the process and you stand on the word for your wholeness, not just your healing, but your wholeness, When that happens, you have created also other habits in the process that you have to come against. What do I mean? Okay. You're battling with something, and you quote the word, you're standing on the word, but then you're still focusing on, it's not been a great day today. It's been, it's been a tough day. I'm just not feeling 100%. And over time, but I'm standing on the scripture, and then over time, bam, there's your healing. It's done. You're like, woohoo, I'm excited. But then every time a symptom comes, oh, that better not be coming back. See, you gotta watch patterns you create in the process, habits you create in the process. And here's what a lot of people do. I know I did it. I did. And this is something that I'm like, okay, I had to really work on, because the Bible is very clear that life and death is in the power of the tongue. Blessing and cursing is in the power of the tongue, right? That's simple. That's simple. So, am I going to continue talking to the stranger that I've allowed in, and let's talk about it, because, oh wait, you talk, I'm the dummy, I'll just repeat it. Or am I going to listen to that, his voice, speak what he says, because that's my truth? Because what begins to happen is I've watched people, and I experienced this, been healed from something, and God, but again, this was before I found out about the wholeness part, because really we come from a place of wholeness now, not just healing. Remember, it was already done. We're made whole, so that's where we come from. But then all of a sudden a little pain comes, a little runny nose comes, a little muscle ache comes, and then all of a sudden what begins to happen? Here comes that stranger, knocking on the door. What should you do in that moment? A lot of people go quoting scripture again. I've learned, if I believe that, it's already done, so I'm going to walk on. I'm not going to stand there and entertain it. I'm just going to do what I know to do. When I dealt with cancer, okay, I stood with all I knew, because I didn't have a lot of people that could really walk it out with me. I just had to get in scripture and find for myself. And then all of a sudden, doctor, everything's in remission, everything, yeah, you're doing great. And so what I did, okay, fine. And it was a battle that I don't think I would have had to battle so hard and so long if I'd known more. And that's where we talk about here. I know it's a lot, but if you're not willing to find out where you are, then you cannot really move forward. And nobody could tell me where I was at that time, because nobody could help me. So then all of a sudden, what happened? I had a moment where the doctor's like, oh, it's in remission, and it came back. And I was mad. I was mad at God. But I found out later, why would I be mad at God when he said, that's your truth? That's the truth. That's the voice. That's the voice. But you've been entertaining that other voice again. I had to admit it, and it was hard. Why? Well, how did you entertain that other voice? Because I'm worn out. I'm tired. I get up every morning and I'm over the toilet for an hour. And then I got to get up and try to eat something, because then all my blood sugar is messed up. This is messed up. This is messed up. And what was I doing? I'm having a conversation with a stranger. But is he really my stranger? He's become my friend. And it's like, man. And so I have a lot of people get upset with me because but it's something I had to learn myself. So if I've learned it and I've proven it, then I can talk about it. So in this, as he's been standing, growing, getting his aha moments, then what have I been doing? Well, I'm growing, I'm standing, and I'm not wavering. I've challenged him, I've I've challenged myself. Because what happens over time, especially when you get tired, you're having somebody who's dealing with something, then all of a sudden you're like, I'm telling you, being tired, you gotta make sure you don't grow weary. I can't tell you it won't happen, but that's why it's so important to have the right voice. So in that, then I've gotta what? I've gotta make sure that I keep going, doing what I'm supposed to do, right? But then what happens in that place? Doesn't it feel like all of a sudden the enemy's coming from every direction? Those strangers are popping up everywhere? Because for a time, then you have to take on a little more responsibility. Okay? And as you're doing that, then all of a sudden, here comes a knock at this door, here comes a knock at this door, here comes a knock at this door, here comes a knock at this door. And I'm like, hold up, and before you know it, you're so weary and you're tired, things begin to bother you that normally wouldn't. So what do? First off, I gotta identify the problem. I gotta identify what I'm dealing with right now. I don't have to like it. Well, of course I don't like it. But what a lot of people tend to do is give up in that. The family member that's standing with someone, they can get weary, but they have to find their strength. And understanding, I can't do it for you. I will stand with you. And I'm not saying that's what we've necessarily been through, but it gives you the example of understanding, because some are going through a lot with some family members right now. But you have a choice. You can stand on the word, hear the voice, and stand, or you can allow weariness to come in, tiredness to come in to the point that you don't hear that voice anymore. Because that other voice is talking. Oh yes, it is. And it can actually talk through the spouse, the family member, the friend, whoever it is. And this is where he tells people at work, he's very open with me. We're very upfront with each other about the word. We're very upfront with what's not right and what is right. And we get challenged a lot, but you know what? I can't get weary. God said you have to find a place of rest in that. Resting in Him and the truth. And don't let it wear you out. But see, this is something that for so long hasn't really been talked about or taught. And there's a lot of people have gotten weary out there. We were talking about the other day, I don't remember who it was, but we were talking about they got so wore out from all the people coming in that were in sin, basically sinners, not saved, but there were so many of them, and because some of the leadership wasn't strong enough, then what began to happen to the leadership? It began to come into the leadership, and all the, well, I mean, their situation is, well, I understand the situation, but that doesn't change the truth. Truth has to be spoken because it's only going to be the truth that what? Sets you free. And a lot of people think the truth and setting them free is putting them off the hook. Letting them off the hook. Have you ever had that moment where you knew you were going to have to deal with something? And you waited, and then all of a sudden somebody else dealt with it and you're like, whew, I don't have to do that now. But then later on, if you hear the voice, he'll come back and say, but I told you to do it. And then you gotta go, and I've had those moments. Oh yeah, we all have, come on. That's part of growth. Okay, so one of the things God was standing here and talking to me about this morning, and we're gonna go to here in a minute, is a standard. You know, everybody says, well, I have standards, but do you have the right standards? Right? And in the Bible, it talks about in four sets of scriptures, so we'll go to 2 Corinthians 10 real quick. And I'll start at verse 1. It says, now I, Paul, myself beseech you by the meekness and the gentleness of Christ, who in presence and base among you, but being absent and bold toward you. But I beseech you that I may not be bold when I'm present with that confidence, wherewith I think to be bold against some, which think of us as if we walked according to the flesh. For though we walk in the flesh, we do not what? We don't war after the flesh. But here's the thing. Flesh needs to be your stranger. Right? Because we're to walk by the Spirit. Live by the Spirit. Right? So here he's saying, you have to understand, for though we walk in the flesh, that means, okay, I'm walking in the flesh right now. But I'm not going to war after it. Because what's happening with people warring after their flesh right now? They think they're going to resolve something that will never be resolved because they're doing it by the flesh. It's whenever we sit here and we continue to walk in the Spirit, let the Spirit do what it needs to do. Let Jesus himself do what he needs to do because he is that word. Right? But if we continue, and that's why every time something happens, you've got to go and check yourself. Is it flesh or is it spirit? Spirit knows. Spirit has a peace about it, even in war. Even in turmoil, there's a peace there to let you know. You know, one of the things we've been talking about too was, and I always say a gut feeling for those that don't understand. Everybody has it. It's just whether they choose to pay attention to it. That's where over time people don't pay attention. They begin to sear. And they begin to become callous. And they begin to just no feelings. That's one thing I like about Farron's testimony. When he gives it, he talks and he's very open, very honest about who he was before he got born again. And when he got born again, he had to go to his children. He had to go to his family. He had to be honest with them. My family just thought I was crazy anyway. They thought I was before I got born again, so it didn't matter to them, you know. But I love when people hear his testimony because so many people are out there saying they're Christians, saying that they know God, they know Jesus, but yet they're not living for him because they don't know his voice. They are still listening to what's supposed to be their stranger, but it isn't. It's still their friend. So then, that always takes me back to something years ago, and I've talked about it over and over, where this man finally, the church I was in, called everybody out, myself included. Are you really saved? And I was like, oh yeah, don't think we didn't all just like, question myself. I've been in ministry this many years. He said, that has nothing to do with this. Are you really saved? And do you understand your salvation? Do you understand what it means? And so many people don't have revelation. They really don't. Because it's not something you can have revelation overnight. It's something that takes time. Your spirit's got it, but now your soul has to be trained. You've got to have those moments that you have to have understanding, right? And that comes from wisdom. Correct? Of the knowledge of who he is. What he's done. So a lot of people sit there, well, yeah, I'm saved, I have in my heart. But is he your Lord? Does he lead you? Does he guide you? Is he the one that whenever things begin to challenge you, you run to the challenge and, don't. Or do you stand and tell your challenge what it's going to do? Do you go and find out, God, is this my battle or is this yours? Or do you automatically try to solve it yourself? When it's supposed to be his. My fight is a good fight of what? Faith. Right? So with faith, doesn't that come trust? So whenever there's certain situations, I'm going to be honest, when there's certain situations that I may not quite have the answer for, I'm not trusting me. I will not trust me, but I will trust him. Well, what do you mean? That means right now my flesh is hollering real loud. But I'm gonna go and I'm gonna go back to the Word. And I'm gonna pray. And I'm gonna get what I need. And I'm not gonna give up until I do. That may take days, that may take weeks, but I don't ever let go. Because until I have my answer, confirmation, whatever it may need to be in that moment, I'm not gonna sit here. I'm not even, no, I'm not. I'm not even, I can't because I'm mad right now. I can't because I'm emotional right now. I can't because right now and that may not be how God wants to deal with it. So I have to what? I have to go back here. And I have to look here. So here's Paul in verse 4. He sits there and he's going on and he says, for the weapons of our warfare, what? They're not carnal, but mighty through God to the pulling down of strongholds. They are not meathead ideas, emotions. I mean, when I finally heard that, people look at that as meathead, and I was like, and this is how it works for me. I changed my words to something I'm like, I am not going to be a meathead. I am not doing it, but I could right now. And my flesh would sure be happy for a moment, and then I'd have to go, oh man. Because here's what happens, and a lot of people don't understand this. And God had to deal with me on this. You're out somewhere, and you're supposed to what? Everywhere you go, you're supposed to carry the light, right? Everywhere you go. Somebody does something in Walmart, not even intentionally, and you just, and you're wearing Jesus on you. You're having all this scripture. In that moment, you could have actually destroyed a witness. There could have been a moment there. But if we want to act out in our flesh, I know. That's how God had to show me some stuff. Because I had somebody tell me that. I had somebody, oh, so you're a Christian? And they said, that's why I don't go to church. Have you ever had anybody say that? I have. Because of how I responded. Maybe the information I had was correct. Maybe what I said was correct, but maybe it's how I did it. You ever thought of that? Sometimes how we do it. Oh, I've had those moments. It's okay. That's part of growth. And then what did I always do? I said, God, I always want another opportunity to make that right. And it's funny, there'll be people I haven't seen in years, and all of a sudden they'll pop across my path. I'm like, hey, how are you? And what's funny is people that have known me for years can see me out and they have no clue who I am. If my hair's up or whatever, but yet I can see somebody I haven't seen for years, and they're like, oh, I know you. Yes, because I did. I've asked for the opportunity to make things right. I love when that happens. Not even for me, but for them, because I feel like, man, I just blew it with somebody. Does that mean I'm flawless? No, I'm working on that. But I have my moments, don't we all? But I love God. I love the Lord. So he goes on and he says, for the weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but mighty through God to the pulling down of strongholds, casting down imaginations and every high thing that exalted itself against the knowledge of God, and bringing into captivity every thought to the obedience of Christ. It says casting down what? Imaginations and every high thing that exalts itself what? Against the knowledge of God. Well, we read where in the, when Lucifer was there, didn't he try to exalt himself above? Right? God? So it says, casting down imaginations and every high thing that exalted itself. People will exalt themselves. People will use positions to exalt themselves. People will use your relationship to exalt themselves. Hear what I'm saying? The enemy's going to work through people, right? Okay. I'm walking through the sanctuary, it's dark, I trip over a chair. Dumb chair. That was the enemy trying to make me fall. No, you need to turn the light on. Right? Now, and I'm going to use as a funny, there'll be times we'll be joking, cutting up, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, y'all know Aaron, out of nowhere, he'll do something just to mess with me. Now, was that his fault? It hit me, affected me, whatever, and I didn't see it coming, right? It would be his fault, right? Or would it? If I know him, and I know the antics, and I know what he does, don't you think I'd be better prepared for it? Okay. We talk about this. If I trip and fall, he's already told me, he warned me. I'll laugh first, then I'll hook you up. He said, that's just who I am. Now, he didn't say he would help me sometimes trip and fall, but you know. But if I know this, then why would I get mad if I fell and saw him laughing? So the first time it happened, I didn't laugh, and I didn't think it was a bit funny, and I threw something at him. Now I'm using basic stuff, but it's just to give you an idea. But then over time, our relationship grows, we get to know one another, so what? I'm always looking. Something's coming. I don't trust it. I just don't. He's like, who, me? Of all the people I know, yes, you. It's always, I know something's coming. So now I should be in a place that doesn't surprise me. It might catch me off guard, but I still was prepared for it. So why do people get so upset when things happen? Why do they get so angry? Why do they get so mad? What are we supposed to do? Cast down imaginations and every high thing that exalts itself against the knowledge of God. But what's happening? Not a lot of people are doing it. And what I thought was interesting is the Bible says, for what? The love of money is what? The root of all evil, right? And there's so many agendas out there that are so money fed. Hear me out. Look at some of the sporting brands. They see popularity out there, so they're going to do what? They're going to jump on board and make more money, right? So they're willing to support pride, right? There were some people I got messages on that were supporting it, and I said, oh, what? See, why should it surprise me? Because we haven't heard them talk about it. But it's a money thing. But don't you feel like they're selling their soul for money? Yes. It's a money thing. And it just hit me. We read that scripture, we read that, we talk about it. For the love of money is the root of what? All evil. And that's all the world's about is what? Making money. And there are people out there that say that they're Christian, that are all about. And I see the lives, and I see the people that have been destroyed over this, and I see the things that have happened. And I'm like, God, why would you? And I'm telling you, I've been taught this. Well, if you're a believer and you sit and you tithe and you give offering and you stand on these scriptures and you do this, and this, it says, well, for the wicked is saved up for the righteous. But I watch people go to actually take wealth from those that are supposed to be brothers and sisters in Christ. And I've heard people say, it's okay. It's okay. They had a flaw. They were dealing with something. And I'm talking ministries doing it. I've watched it, and some big time ministries have done that. I have watched them take those things that the word laid out for the growth of the kingdom, and it's robbing Peter, as they say, to pay Paul. but they're the part. And I've seen it for myself. So I'm sitting here and I'm looking. Now you have the beer company that lost all that money based on one moment in time, right? And now they're gonna try to fix it. Well, you can't fix it with me until you find Jesus. And I don't see that happening. So what are they doing? They're sitting there and they're giving it back to families of less fortunate, is that right?
Military veterans.
Oh, military families. Man. But how many people they're gonna look at that and they're gonna be going, oh, that's what they did, they realized what they did was wrong. That's not the answer. That did not fix anything, only Jesus can. Only Jesus can. So real quick, I got a lot of scripture, I'm not gonna get it all. Go to Romans 1. And I can go over more of it Tuesday. But I just think this really needs to be out there. Because God put on my heart, there are people, even though sometimes in here, people may not, well, I don't really need that. We all need the word. We all need it. But there are people out there that are watching that are home. And they don't know which way to go, but they're struggling knowing the way they're on right now is not right. The way that they're heading is not right. So Romans 1:1, and I'm gonna kind of read through this because I'm gonna get to a certain part. Paul, a servant of Jesus Christ, called to be an apostle, separated unto the gospel of God, which he had promised afore by his prophets in the Holy Scriptures, concerning his Son, Jesus Christ our Lord, which was made of the seed of David according to the flesh, and declared to be the Son of God with power, according to the Spirit of holiness by the resurrection from the dead, by whom we have received grace and apostleship for obedience to the faith among all nations for his name, among whom are ye also the called of Christ. So we see here, everybody has been called, right? Everybody has received an invitation, but not everybody is going to accept it. You know, I hear people talking about ever since COVID happened, and it just tickles me how upset they get. But they're like, we had this big party planned and all this, and we sent out all these invitations, and we didn't get any RSVPs, or we got a few, and then not everybody showed up, and but you're that upset. You know what? I'm more upset because Jesus called everybody, but not everybody accepted the invitation. I'm more focused about that than I am a party held for somebody. But see, that's where I'm at. Because when we get born again, our hearts are for him, right? There was an exchange. I was once a slave to the world, but now I am to him, and I want to serve. And what he says there and what hurts him should hurt me. Yes? What satisfies him should satisfy me. Right? So then he goes on, verse 7, to all that be in Rome, beloved of God, called to be saints, grace to you. Now I like that. He says there's that word called to be saints. Grace to you and peace from God our Father and the Lord Jesus Christ. So he said, he's addressing Rome as a whole, yes? And he said, to all that be in Rome, beloved of God, called, every one of them, to be saints. Grace to you and peace from God our Father and the Lord Jesus Christ. First, I thank my God through Jesus for you all, that your faith is spoken of throughout the whole world. For God is my witness, whom I serve with my spirit in the gospel of his Son, that without ceasing I make mention of you always in prayers, making request, if by any means now at length I might have a prosperous journey by the will of God to come unto you. For I long to see you, that I may impart into you some spiritual gift, to the end you may be established. That is, may I be comforted together with you by the mutual faith, both of you and me. Now that's pretty powerful. He has a purpose, and see, here's the thing. And I'll say this, and not everybody's going to agree with it, but it has to be okay. Here's Paul saying, I long to see you, that I may impart unto you some spiritual gift. I look forward to seeing you because I want to impart into you something. I don't just want to come hang out. I have a purpose. And that's the purpose that I want to achieve. To the end you may be established, that is, that I may be comforted together with you by what? Mutual faith, both of you and me. Mutual faith, both you and me. There's purpose. We don't just come to sit and say, how's it going? And that's all you talk about. What did he say? Look, that I can inspire spiritual gifts, something from the Father, something that I can share, and then we can go back and forth. And then we can share mutual faith together. Because it's hard whenever you want to sit there and you want to impart into somebody, and it's challenging. Because all you're doing is trying to give them something that they may not want. See, you're going to be the stranger to them. Because the other stranger is the friend. And that can be tough, it can be challenging. We have to understand that. But so many times people can't handle rejection like that, so what do? They sit there and take forever trying to convince somebody of something that they're not hearing. They're not. And then people, well, don't give up on them. I mean, I'm not giving up on them. It's just, they're listening to another voice. And I'm not a friend with that voice. So then he goes on and he says, now I would not have you ignorant, brethren. And what's the word ignorant mean? Just unaware. But it's amazing the people, we've actually been talking with him where he's at and myself. People go, I'm just ignorant. Well, yeah, you are. Why would you say that? Well, what's ignorant? Stupid? That's not what I said. You are ignorant. I'm in agreement with you. You just don't know. And it's funny, the ones that will receive that, because I don't like being called stupid myself. So it'd be like, I'd rather take that definition than, being called stupid. Yeah. You do stupid things. Okay, I do stupid things when I'm not thinking. But now I would not have you ignorant, brethren, that oftentimes I purpose to come unto you, but was led hitherto, that I might have some fruit among you also, even as among other Gentiles. I am debtor both to the Greeks and to the barbarians, both to the wise and to the unwise. So as much as in me is, I am ready to preach the gospel to you that are at Rome also. That's a lot. In verse 16, for I'm not ashamed of the gospel of Christ. For it is the power of God unto salvation to everyone that believeth, to the Jew first and also to the Greek. So what is Paul? He's saying, I'm not ashamed. I'm not going to back down. I'm not going to hide from the truth. I'm not ashamed of the gospel because of why? For it is the power of God unto salvation. It's the what? The power of who? God. Unto salvation to everyone that believeth, to the Jew first and also to the Greek. So if you're out there and these people are not hearing his voice, but they're hearing the voice of a stranger, they will never find salvation. They never will. And it's hard and it stinks and it's tough. But that doesn't mean we change who we are, but I'm watching so many change. They want to save them, but they're not saving them with truth. They're saving them by a lie. And they think it's truth. Well, I mean, they're going through this. I understand, give them truth so they can be set free. Give them truth so that they can come out of it. Give them what they need so they can rise. And the ones that are listening and hear that voice, you got to be open to hear his voice. But you got to get the word to them first. The reason they're not coming to him because they're not getting the truth. What they're getting is a lie that now they believe is truth. Oh, I can sin and I can war and all this junk and it's okay because he loves me. For God so loved the world, yes, he gave his one and only begotten Son, so that whosoever should believe on him will what?
Not perish.
Have everlasting life. But these people are going to perish because people aren't speaking truth. But it hurts them. It hurt me. I didn't jump for joy when I found out what I was doing. But it pierced me because I was open to hear it. It pierced me because it was a different voice than the voice that I had been entertained to hear. They know that voice, believe it or not. They hear the other voice because it doesn't sound nothing like the one they've been listening to. And I'm not talking about your vocal cords. I'm talking about his voice through truth. Because it does. You may not see the results right away. It's okay. That's not your job. Your job is just to bring truth and let God do the rest. But he's saying, I am not ashamed of the gospel of Christ, for it's the power of God unto salvation to everyone that believeth, to the Jew first and also to the Greek. For therein is the righteousness of God revealed from faith to faith, that is written, the just shall live by faith. Now wait a minute. Go back to 17. For therein is the righteousness of God revealed. Now how is it revealed? From faith to faith, as it is written. The just shall live by faith. It's revealed when you walk from what? Faith to faith, as it is written. The just shall live by faith. Faith without works is dead. If you do not, I had to write some of this stuff down. I'm not going there, but in Romans 14:23, it says, for whatsoever is not of faith is sin. I remember when I read it, but then one day it hit me like a ton of bricks. If I am not living by faith, I am living in sin. Now, does that mean if I'm dealing with an issue and I'm having a struggle with it, because we all talked about this before, do we struggle? Yes, but do you accept the challenge? Absolutely. If I struggle, I'm going to accept the challenge because I'm going to get rid of that struggle. So, Lord, what is my challenge? Because I'm struggling in the challenge. But I tend to want to be like, I accept the challenge. What is it? Well, when you accept the challenge, that means you're about ready to what? Go from faith to faith. You're going to, the just live by faith. I may not understand it, I may not get it, but I know he does, and this is the way I'm going. Because that's what? The just will live by faith. That means when I walk in faith, I am just. Because I'm going to live by that. But when I don't, then I'm what? It says, for whatsoever is not of faith is sin. And that's why I want to challenge people so much. And he does it, I do it. Challenge people. Look, if you don't believe me, go to the Word. Look at it for yourself. I'm going to challenge you. I'll challenge you in that. Tell me if I'm lying. Oh, wait. Tell me if he's lying. Because I guarantee you, I can give you this much, but if you're willing to have faith to dive into that, find your answer, he'll give you more. Bring it to me. I need it. But you better make sure it lines up. Because it's so important that we get this. Because, again, we've got people out there, they're dying. and they're gonna go to hell. That stinks. We hate hearing those words. But it's because they are listening to the wrong voice. Because they're taught the wrong voice. You know, whenever a little baby starts growing up, they got mom and dad, usually what's the first word they say? Dada. And mama's over there going, Mama, Dada. Oh, I remember that. I'm like, that is so wrong. You see me every day, all the, But what happens? A lot of times they hear Dada. That can be a spiritual thing people might not realize. They ain't been away from him that long. That may be who they're talking about. We don't know. That's what I love about babies. It's like some of the conversation, you're like watching them and they're looking and you don't know what they're looking at. And they're having conversations and you don't know. Man, how amazing is that? How amazing is that? And God brought something back to me this morning when I was going over this and looking at it. He said, he said, remember when we had a conversation, there was a young lady, she was pregnant, and after the baby was born, the baby didn't want nothing to do with it. The baby literally didn't want anything to do with it. Cried every time she held the baby. Every time her voice baby started crying. And I sat there and so I started talking. She goes, I don't understand. I said, come on. Just talk to you for a few minutes. When you were pregnant, what was your life like? Because that baby knows. That baby hears. That baby senses. There's frequencies. There's vibrations. There's all these things. And that baby is in the mother. So that baby gets everything the mother's getting. And so she began to tell me the relationship she was in and the stress and the frustration. And so that baby took all that in. And that baby had nobody else to release it on. But that baby recognized what? Her voice. That's hard to hear, but it's true. It's true. Why do you think it was when Elizabeth and Mary came together? John leaped in her womb. Well, my goodness, Jesus was right next door. Brother! I often just wonder, Mary carrying that baby, what all was going on in Mary the whole time. We think about, she's carrying Jesus, the Son of God. Yeah, but while he's doing what he's doing, what is it doing to her? What's it doing to her? Man, you got the glory sitting on the inside of you. You got that baby. Oh, what's going on? Are you getting revelations? Because where he talks about that we have the word on the inside, she literally carried that word. I just was like, see, I've got my list of people I'm going to talk to in heaven. I want to know your experiences. Because I look at it now and think, man, how amazing. How amazing. Oh, my goodness. So then verse 18, for the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness. Now, did it say the all for you? It said the wrath. Right? It said, for the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men who hold the truth in what? Unrighteousness. Because that which may be known of God is manifest in them. For God has showed it unto them. For the invisible things of him from the creation of the world are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse. Let's look at that again. And that can be a tongue twister. Verse 18. For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven. It's revealed, right? From heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men who hold the truth in unrighteousness. That word hold there talks about hold down, suppress, imprison, bridle. because that which may be known of God is manifest in them. For God has showed it unto them. For the invisible things of him from the creations of the world are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead, so that they are what? Without excuse. There's no excuse for men to be in the ignorance of the things of God. There's no way. Because I love this, because it was always something I had to question. Well, Lord, how are the people over wherever, how are they going to know the gospel if nobody takes it to them? But you got the Holy Spirit. You've got those things that you need. It's going to be revealed. So no one can say, I don't know. One thing that I know, when I messed up, I knew it because of right here. Right here. Even before I came to the Lord, I knew when I messed up because I felt it. So what did I do? I tried to hide it. So when it came to my drugs and everything, every time I screwed up and I messed up, then I had to go do that so I didn't feel this. So what was I doing? I was pushing it, I was hiding it. I'm like, you ain't feeling nothing. And then over time, that's exactly what happened. I stopped feeling it. I didn't care. I did things to myself, others, I did not care. And I was one of those, I was like a rabbit. I'd do it and run. And I ran a whole lot. Even my parents were like, when are you going to stop running? I'm not running from nothing. That's why in like 2 years I lived 20 different places. Because I would mess up. I didn't know how to fix it. And no one was there to help me, so I ran. And I found the drugs and the alcohol to make it better. It didn't make it better, it just made me not feel it. And then I came to know him. It was one of the greatest moments, but then I had to walk some stuff out that I wish I had some others that would have walked it out with me. I thank the Lord, and I thank Jesus for being there, and the Holy Spirit, but all of a sudden, nobody taught me that shame was gone too, so I held on to the shame. But he said even that's gone. Because no one took the word and broke it down for me to walk in victory. I thought I was in more bondage because no one wanted to share the truth with me because they were too concerned about what made me mad. They were too concerned about what made me cry. So they just wanted they wanted to appease me. And I got mad when I did start finding out the truth. And then I started questioning their truth. What voice do you hear? Because, what? No. You have people sitting here having sex outside of marriage. I was the worst. And I say that because that's my story. And I did it for all the wrong reasons. Well, what other reason would there? It wouldn't be no right reason to do it, right? So in that, I did those things. And then here's what I was told. Well, now you got Jesus in your life, you're still going to have those struggles. What? I thought, I read that when you ask him into your heart, that all of a sudden those desires won't be there. And they weren't. But they tried to convince me that they would be. How does the world do it today? You're still going to struggle. Those emotions may still be there. You're still going to want to do those things, but you've got to come against the flesh so you're not convinced. Your testimony in bringing the truth really wasn't the truth, because didn't it say when they brought the truth, there was power of God in it for salvation? That means there was that exchange that took me out of that into this, where now I have victory. Don't understand it all, but I know if it goes against his word, I shall have no desire for it. I should not have a desire. So if I still do, why? I'm going to ask the why question. See, I was taught don't ask why. I'm going to ask why. because it's on me, no one else. I can never blame anyone else because he said right there, everybody will come to know him. It's just what they do. What are you going to do with it? You can't tell me whenever people are going and they're preaching these things to people that are struggling with, am I male, am I female, am I this, am I that? Well, look, you're questioning it already. And then somebody from the church wants to come and they're trying to say, well, it's okay. And then you're fighting back. So that ought to tell you something. Something ain't right. I talk to people now that you have to really hear the voice of God on this, because people will come in and they'll share things, and then I'm like, Lord, what question can I ask them to get their attention? For them to think for just a moment. Because they'll come in and they're like, I was in a conversation with my family the other day, and we were talking about this, but something didn't feel right. Okay? Why do you think it didn't feel right? What about it bothered you? Man, that's an open door to sharing the gospel. That's an open door to share the truth. Now, once you do your part, it's up to what? It's up to Jesus to do his part, right? Okay, we'll be at verse 20. Because that when they knew God, they glorified him not as God, neither were thankful, but became vain in their imaginations, and their foolish hearts was darkened. It says, because that what? Because that when they knew God, they glorified him not as God. But there's that word knew. They knew God. But they chose what? They chose not to glorify him. Neither were they what? Thankful, but became vain in their imaginations. Their foolish hearts were darkened. Professing themselves to be wise, they became what? Fools. And changed the glory of the incorruptible God unto an image made like to corruptible man, and to birds and four-footed beasts and creeping things. And I talked to y'all about that Tuesday, what that was. Listen to it again. And changed the glory of the uncorruptible God into an image made like to corruptible man, and to birds and four-footed beasts and creeping things. And one of the things was the flag. They took the rainbow, turned it into a flag, and said, this is us. This is who we are. No, it's not. That was the promise that belongs to us. You can't have it. It doesn't belong to you. You want to take it and make it corruptible, that's on you for your image, but that is not truth. See, we can sit here and we can take a crucifixion, and I say crucifixion because it's a cross with Jesus on it. He's no longer there. So I've taken something, turned it, and said, here, take it. Show the devil who he is. That is what? It's just an image. It's just an idol. Throw it down. He lives on the inside of me. Let them see Jesus in me. Let them know his power through me. And I'm not on that cross anymore either, because when he died and came back, so did I. But that means you have to die to everything that is corruptible. You have to die to you. Come back up. Be resurrected in his image, in his likeness. Because the old man was not. But people are out there going, but I am in the image of God. No, you're not. If you're not living for him, he's not in you. No, you're not. And I'll never forget when that got brought to me. And I was just like, whoa. Wait a minute. I thought I'd been saved all these years. It made me stop and check myself. I had to. Because if I chose not to, I guarantee you I'd still be doing stuff I'm not supposed to. But we don't want to hear that we have to watch what we say. We don't want to hear we have to watch what we think. We don't want to hear we have to watch what goes in us. Hey, it's not what goes in, it's what comes out of you. Well, guess what? What's going to go in you is going to come out of you. But I don't want to hear that. I want to listen to what I want to. I want to go do the things I want to. Well, you keep going and you do the things you want to. Don't get upset when you get the results of you. Because that voice has become your friend. When that voice should be a stranger. If it does not line up with this. Right? I mean, there's things that we don't want to hear, but if it's the word, I gotta hear. I choose to hear. Because I know that I need to hear. Because when I do, light, remember, dark can't comprehend light. It can't stop it. So when I open myself up to light, guess what? Darkness got to go. Darkness must go. Wherefore God also gave them up to uncleanness through the lust of what? Their own hearts, to dishonor their own bodies between themselves. Who changed the truth of God into a lie, and worshipped and served the creature more than the Creator, who is blessed forever. Amen? So be it. Who changed the truth of God into what? A lie. Now we've talked about it. We've got to get this. And worshipped and served the what? The creature more than the Creator. Man. For this cause God gave them up into vile affections, for even the women did change the natural use into that which is against nature. And likewise also the men, leaving the natural use of the woman, burned in their lust one toward another, men with men, working with witches unseemingly, and receiving in themselves that recompense of their error which was meet. What's recompense? Payment. It's a payment. And even as they did not like to retain God in their knowledge, God gave them over to a reprobate mind to do those things which are not convenient. Why would God allow? It was choice. It was choice. Now, I'm going to read I'm going to read 28 through 32. And I normally never do this, but I liked how this broke it down. Okay. Now I'm reading this out of the Message. Normally I don't, but I like how this broke this down. It makes it real clear. Okay? Since they didn't bother to acknowledge God, God quit bothering them and let them run loose. And then all hell broke loose. Rampant evil, grabbing and grasping, vicious backstabbing. They made life hell on earth with their envy, wanton killing, bickering and cheating. Look at them. Mean-spirited, venomous, fork-tongued God-bashers, bullies, swaggerers, insufferable windbags. They keep inventing new ways of wrecking lives. They ditch their parents when they get in the way. Stupid, slimy, cruel, cold-blooded. And it's not as if they don't know better. They know perfectly well they're spitting in God's face, and they don't care. Worse, they hand out prizes to those who do the worst things the best. That's tough. That's hard. But that's not talking about us. But it is talking about those out there. They don't want to hear his voice. They prefer the voice of the stranger. But the thing is, we got to make sure that we're not being that voice to them. We have to be the voice of truth. I thought that was so interesting how that was the last song. Because I'm like, absolutely, the voice of truth has to be. But it hurt my feelings. You know what? He never asked me about mine. I mean, he didn't. I didn't find anywhere in the Bible where Jesus asked me about my feelings and how I feel about something. And he also told me when I was called to preach and called to teach, I can't let those things for others move me either. Oh, do they sometimes? Yeah, sometimes I go home and I'm like, that's tough. It was hard. It can be emotional on me because when you know the heart of people and you know the struggles they have, people think, well, you can come up there and you're just like, oh, this and this. That doesn't mean when I go home I don't sit there and cry because I know. It goes for anybody that preaches. If they're doing, I'm talking ones that hear the voice. For God so loved the world. Talk about somebody who felt for the sinner. He said, I'll make a way out. But he couldn't change what he put in place. Right? Couldn't do that because he was the one that put it in place. He demands holiness. He requires it. I can't be holy. Yes, you can if you're in him. We've had many messages about this. Many messages. And that's the thing. That's why staying connected is so important. Because if you just get a message here and you just get a message there, but you don't stay consistent where God has got you, you're going to miss some of the other messages that really would help balance everything out. We talk about this. You can't do everything in one day. You can't do everything in an hour. It's a process. And that's why I've learned God talks to us, and it's like, okay, we're going to keep going until this breaks. We're going to keep doing what God says. Until something shifts, we're going to keep doing what God says. But to get the entirety of it, people have got to stay connected. Because if you run to one church, their message may not be what this church is. Probably won't be. And then you can go somewhere else and their message may be different, may be on point, but that's not where God's having us address things. But what happens? Now they're trying to say, this is so funny to me, but they're trying to use a medical term. And, okay, if that's what they want to do, but it's a spiritual thing. People get in a fight or flight. And now they're saying, well, if you're in a fight or flight mode, it's because of something in your body's out of balance. Yes, you are. True? Untrue? What do you want to do? What voice do you want to hear? And here's the thing. If you'll notice, people that want to hear the voice of the stranger, they follow them, and the stranger don't even know what he's doing. And leads them in what? Chaos. Leads them astray. But of course now they're bringing it to a medical term. Okay. But I'm going to bring you what the truth says. Because when you line up with truth, and your spirit's perfect, keep developing that soul, and that body will line up. That's why people don't understand. Well, I quote the scripture over and over and I'm still struggling with this. Don't stop. Don't stop. But find out why you're still struggling with it. Is it actually something's taking place on the inside and you're growing? Or are you resisting? Sometimes growth doesn't come because you're resisting. You're not following the instruction. Right? Okay, everybody good? All right, well, I'm going to stop there. Dear Heavenly Father, we just thank you, Lord, for your word that is true. We thank you, Lord, that we hear the voice of the shepherd. We don't follow the stranger. We don't know the voice of the stranger. And anytime a stranger comes knocking, We tell them they got to go in Jesus' name. We only hear his voice. Lord, I thank you that everyone in this place knows Jesus is personal Lord and Savior. Lord, I thank you that you have given us your dear Son so that we can walk, talk, have results according to what's already been done. And that we don't bring that voice of a stranger to lead people astray. That we're honest with ourselves. If we don't know something, we get in the Word till we find it. We don't speak nothing but the Word. And make sure it's the truth of the Word. Not opinion, not feeling, not emotion. Lord, I thank you for everyone in this place, Lord, that is willing to stand and stick it out when things are challenging and they're struggling to challenge because they're listening. They have peace on the inside from the Spirit. The Spirit is willing, the flesh is weak, but that Spirit speaks loud to them. And that peace. And Lord, we just thank you. Amen.